All right. Hello, and how is everybody today? We are coming to you for the launch of another book. We're really excited. We have Ashley Hawthorne here with her third book. Does it feel different for the third time?
Actually, it starts to feel a little bit familiar. The book is different, but the process is the same, which is good for me because I like things that I'm familiar and
There
comfortable
you
with.
go.
So
It's
I'm
yeah,
excited
see, now
about
you're
this
an
one.
old pro.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first few times we did this, I was really, really nervous. So I've gotten better at it, done more interviews and stuff for the first two books, and it's a little bit easier for me now to be able to come on and talk about the books and not feel like I'm having a whole panic attack while I'm doing it. So
Oh, that's awesome. What for everyone who does not know, Ashley Hawthorne is a romantic suspense author, so all of her books have all that romance, but they also have a little bit of that, or some of them have even more suspense than others. Um, Element to them, which really make them interesting to read, not just for romance lovers, but for lovers of a little bit of mystery, a little bit of suspense. It's all in there. So this is your third book with us, and we're so excited about it. But this one's a little different because Beneath Calm Waters is the first in a duology.
yes, which is the first time I've done that. The first two were standalones that were not connected, so this is the first time I've written a book and then had to go and try to write the sequel, which I have found exceptionally challenging. We've had to push the my date for turning it into you back a couple of times because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, for
Um,
those of you who are joining us, you can type any questions into the chat and we will get to those questions or any words of congratulation or encouragement for Ashley. We are very excited about this book. So, is there anything that made you want to write a duology instead of a standalone this time?
well, this I think this is the first time I had a couple in the first book that didn't have like a full resolution to their romantic story by the time that story was over with, and I had sent it off to some of my friends to read, and they were like, "We love this B couple that you've got going on here. You should give them their own book. Like we want to see them and their stories." I was like, I mean, yeah, let's do it. Let's write a whole other book for them because the more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, everybody's gonna fall in love with those two and want to see them have their happily ever after. So
When you write those B characters that are so well loved, you really know you have something because that's when you know that the author's really written characters, not just the main characters, but characters in general that are memorable, that people attach themselves to, and that's not always an easy thing to do. To be able to write that B element where you have characters that are without like outside of the main story just a bit that people latch onto. So that's great that happened with this book.
yeah. I didn't write the first one expecting to go into it writing the second one, so it took me by surprise. I think that people really connected with the two of them as much as they did.
Were those characters that you were connected to as well, or were you surprised, like totally surprised?
I liked them, but to be honest, until somebody brought it up, it just never, it didn't occur to me to give them their own whole story. But as soon as that, somebody brought the idea up, I was like, yes, absolutely. I can easily see the two of them deserving to have their own book and their own story because they are both just wonderful characters to me. I love them.
That is great. That is great. And the story is fabulous. We really fell in love with it.
Thank you. I
Do
think
you,
this is the first one. It's a little bit different for me because I know the first two kind of had a little bit of a mystery element to them, but I think this one has probably like a little bit more what you would consider traditional romantic suspense. So
yeah, it's a little more suspenseful than the other two. A little more maybe edgier in some ways than the other two. So would you say that it's getting easier with each book, or do you think it's just a totally different process?
every book feels like its own process. I felt like this one was actually pretty easy because it was writing what in my mind was going to be a standalone
Mhm.
story that had romance and suspense elements. And I was like, yeah, I've done that before. I know what I'm doing. I know how to create a character and how to create a world. And then the first sequel I think has been different because that's the first time I've ever tried to create a continuation in the same world and with the same characters. I was like, how do I make this feel like the same place and the same characters that it was from the first book and kind of keep all those details and stuff consistent. So that's been a unique challenge for me with that one. But I think I've gotten more comfortable in my writing process for sure.
I think you can definitely tell in this book that um, because some books have that like that first book feel, and then this book really feels more seasoned. Not that the other books aren't fabulous, but this book really does feel very like a seasoned author.
Well, I appreciate that. I said I've tried really hard to kind of nail down the process and what that looks like for me. I've become like a really heavy plotter and kind of thinking things through a little bit more, how where stuff falls inside the story and how to make sure everything wraps up prettily and stuff by the end than I knew how to do when I wrote my first book. So
Definitely, definitely. For those of you who have just joined us, please welcome. We're glad to have you here, but please type something into the chat to let us know you're here. If you have a question or if you have anything else to tell Ashley, we would love to share it. So I know you have some excerpts to read first. Would you like to read the first one?
sure. I don't know why this part still makes me nervous. Like the talking part's gotten easier, but the reading part has definitely not gotten like, oh god, please don't judge me. Okay. So the first one, I think it probably has less to do with the romance and more to do with like the lost part that the book touches on, and the issues that Grayson has with moving back to his hometown after the death of his grandfather, and kind of trying to start to deal with the trauma that he had with when he ran away from his hometown and that kind of stuff. So he's arrived back to Barlow House, and he's gone down to the beach that's where his grandfather drowned, and he's staring out over the water. So it says, someday, probably soon, Edith would drag him to the cemetery. She'd insist that he pay his respects at whatever plot of land they had buried his grandfather in. It was important, not so much because she thought Grayson would mourn, but because it was the proper thing to do. If he didn't go, people would talk. There would be gossip, whispers, and speculation that maybe everything wasn't as picturesque at Barlow House as they had all been led to believe. So she'd nag, and because he loved her, he would go and stand cold sentry over a headstone. But this little slice of rocky beach with its crashing waves and towering evergreen trees that marched straight up to the shore, this was George's grave. If there was a place where his grandfather's spirit would linger, where the people that had known him in life could visit and feel his presence, it certainly wouldn't be at the cemetery. George would have no interest in haunting the well trimmed grass with its neat and tidy little rows of the dearly departed. He would be here, part of the wind and the waves and the high pitched scream of the gulls as they scoured the beach for their dinners. For a moment, Grayson was tempted to speak George's name, to let his voice carry across the bay and see what might answer, but his courage failed him. Instead, he stood on the shore, feet inches from the water, and wondered what it was like to drown.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful. I love it. And for those of you who haven't seen, this is the gorgeous cover by our cover artist Diana. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I love that. This one is the cover for this one's a little bit different. My first two are a little bit more flowery and I think a little bit more romance heavy, whereas this one I think leans more into the suspense aspect of it. So that's a little bit of a change for me, but I think I really like it.
I think it really meets the genre requirements. I think it really, you can really tell it's suspenseful. And I love the window edition in the back.
Yeah.
So, and for those of you who know, the paperback will be up shortly on Amazon. We've had a glitch and we are working on that. It should be up very shortly on Amazon. So you can buy this paperback, get the gorgeous paperback for your bookshelf. But the ebook is available wherever ebooks are sold. So you can go and pick that up really quick and start reading it tonight. And you can start that while you're waiting on the paperback. Get both.
There's always a glitch on launch day. There's always something that Amazon's just like, no, I'm not going to do that.
No, Amazon does not play well. Amazon does not do pre-orders, and Amazon does not play well with Ingram, so we always have a glitch. Sometimes we get lucky, but most of the time there is some issue. So then we can't upload it till that day. And so it's been uploaded. We just need to wait till it processes, but that's usually pretty quickly. So it could be within a few hours. It could be tomorrow morning, but by then it will be up. Definitely, because I already uploaded it a couple hours ago, so we have a couple hours in, so hopefully that'll be remedied as soon as possible. So, but that's just the joys of publishing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens. I mean, I know if we were being a little bit of a small press, but I have heard from people with big five publishers and stuff, there's always something on pub day that just kind of goes slightly wrong. It's tradition. That's just publishing.
There you go. It's part of the industry sometimes.
There you go.
And it's always with the paperback. The ebooks seem to go fine. It's always with the paperback that the glitch is. So, but it is out there for you guys to buy and purchase, please, and leave a review if you do purchase it. It has some awesome reviews already out there, so we're really excited about. I think you already have 2 reviews on Amazon, so that is fabulous. That's a good start for launch day. So, so do you have anything else in the works that we should know about?
I've got some stuff that I am thinking about. Nothing that's super far along into the process because I've been like the world seems like it's on fire lately, and I've been have just kind of in survival mode lately. I mean, I knocked out the first few books that I wrote pretty quickly. There was a historical horror romance that I was querying for a while. Um, that I'm supposed to be revising. I got an agent that asked for a revise and resubmit on that one, and I haven't managed to get that
Awesome.
done either. So
That's great.
I think as far as my contemporary stuff goes, I've got some good ideas and some outlines and stuff. But until I get the sequels knocked out for you for this
Mhm.
one, I haven't really touched much else.
Okay, well, but you have a lot on your mind, a lot coming, so that's exciting. And that revise and resubmit is a great. That's a great step.
Yeah, yeah, that's the furthest I've gotten in the process of trying to get an agent. So
That is fabulous. I hope that all works because you definitely deserve that.
I appreciate that. Then that's a very different genre, which I think has always been kind of my hope was that I would be able to kind of split the difference between maybe like a bigger, get an agent and get one genre going with like a bigger press, and then maybe still do like self-published small press on the side for a different genre. Because when I'm not experiencing, world-ending kind of historical events, I write pretty fast.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I can see. So do you really want to be a dual genre author, or is there one that's your true love?
No, I mean, everything for me is romance. That's the core of it is always going to be some kind of romance. But I like the idea of having, I mean, I love the contemporary romantic suspense, and I've got lots of ideas for that. But I also have ideas that are more like a darker, almost like a horror or a dark fantasy or something like that, that I would love to be able to write that genre as well.
Okay. Do you think you would go into romantasy or just keep it dark fantasy?
Um, I honestly I feel like probably I'm going to end up in that romantic horror element. Romantasy. I am not super great with building a world from the ground up and making a magic system and all that other kind of stuff. I love to read it, but I've tried to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to brainstorm an idea for this. It's like, no, that is really hard. So all of the authors that are making worlds and stuff from the ground up have my entire respect because that is some very hard stuff to do.
It's a big undertaking.
It is.
It really is. Well, I think that you're really strong in the romance genre, so but it's nice to experiment and see what else is out there and what else you can do because you can always do more than you think you can.
Yeah, yeah. I was really surprised when that idea for the horror romance came to me because that was not something that I had considered before that particular book idea, and I was like, oh yeah, that's fun. I like that. And the one that I wrote was kind of historical, a little bit of a paranormal horror. And that was a lot of fun to write. So I think that kind of sticking in that area would be really fun for me.
And that's the really good thing that you're doing things that you find fun. So always keep the writing fun and something that you really want to do, and you're going to produce something better because you enjoyed it. And that really shines through the writing.
I think it does. I've definitely noticed that. You can tell when you pick up a book that the author really has invested a lot of what fun for them. They had a good time writing it, and you can feel it in the story.
Definitely. That's why I think it's so important that you're writing what you want to write and not always concentrating on the rules all the time, because then that really leaves you open to write what interests you and that's going to shine.
And that's a little bit challenging for me because it feels like rom coms and romantasy are what's really super popular right now. And I'm not funny enough to write a rom com, and I don't wrote good well enough to write a romantasy. So we get what we get from me.
But that's great. I mean, you're who you are and you're shining through your books, and that's important. So, and that's what I always love because we have authors that we have signed that I can like I don't even if they were to give me their book blind and I didn't know like their name wasn't attached, I could tell you who wrote it. And it's because they shine through.
And that's good solid branding right there when you can tell who wrote a book just because just from reading the book itself and the stuff that they put in there. So my hope is that one of these days even you'd be able to tell that I wrote a book because I've nailed that author branding part enough that it feels like one of my stories.
Exactly. And that's the hard part sometimes, because I think that authors lean so much on the marketing and that they want to make the book marketable, but they're not using what is part of them that can be marketable.
Right.
So if you're in your book, it's going to be easier to market because you're like you're shining through, and then you marketing yourself
Yeah.
in a lot of ways and your personality. And I think that that's a really good thing to be able to market, an easier thing to market than something that's not you.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And it's challenging to get into the mindset of making yourself a brand,
Yes, it
and
is.
putting yourself out there that way. But I definitely think people are more successful when they can figure that part of it out than they are when they're just writing to market and trying to put out something they think other people will buy, even though it's not what they really love.
Right. Exactly. Because like you said, readers are gonna pick up the book and they're gonna really pick up on that
Yeah.
really easily. So would you like to read another excerpt?
Yeah. This one, I think, if I can find it, is actually a little bit more. Well, it's a lot more of the romance aspect of it. So, the two. This is kind of a slow burn. The two of them really don't like each other. I've written quite a few of those where it's just like their first impressions of each other are not super great, and then you get that kind of like tension that kind of builds as they kind of start to like each other a little bit. Um, these two both have their reasons where they're like, no, we definitely can't do this. And this is kind of one of those moments where the passion between them kind of overrides their common sense a little bit. Um, so they're in the kitchen together alone, and it says time stopped and then stretched, both of them frozen in that breathless second as they waited to see what the other would do next. She wanted to step back, to pull herself back to sanity, but before she could move, it was already too late. He'd been reckless before, but polite. This time, almost to make up for it, he wasted no time in niceties. His hands were cupped under her thighs, lifting and separating until he had hoisted her up and pressed her against him. Her legs had nowhere to go but around his waist, and before she could do anything more than wrap her arms around his shoulders and hold on, he had already caught her bottom lip between his teeth. He nipped just to the point of pain, tugged her mouth open, and plundered with a silken tongue. All her good intentions went up in flames. She clung to him, fingers tangled in his hair, as every fantasy she had ever had about kissing him got blown out of the water by the sheer overwhelming reality of it. His mouth was hot and greedy, consuming her as his hands kneaded the flesh of her thighs.
Wow. That makes you want to read more. Do you find that it's easier to write the romantic part than the suspense part, or do they both come easy?
I think it's easier to write the romance part because the suspense element you kind of have to have almost that like element of surprise. You have to. For me, the suspense is there's always like the true answer to the question of who did it, right? But
Right.
then you have to put down enough clues so that once that answer is revealed, the reader will go back and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then you also have to put down enough clues that are misdirecting that they don't pick it up immediately, right? Because then that just kind of takes out the fun. So I think there's just more. You have to consider it a little bit from more angles. You got to put down more stuff. Whereas the romance to me is just kind of like really connecting two people and
Mhm.
giving them a reason to like each other and a reason to not immediately be together, right? Because if they were immediately together, you wouldn't have much of a story. So
True. True. That makes sense. Do you find that you have to be a more careful plotter when you're doing suspense?
yeah, I think, and I think when you're trying to write the romance and the suspense, you really have to be about the plotting because really, to me, it feels like when something happens, it should advance both. It should bring them closer together, but it also needs to kind of connect back to the mystery and propel that element of it forward as well. So it can be kind of hard to make sure that the pacing is working on both levels, and you don't leave one of them behind in order to focus too much on the other.
Okay.
And then I think the plotting aspect of that really helps to kind of make sure you're bringing both sides of the story along at pretty much the same rate.
Okay. Makes sense. Did you have a character that you particularly enjoyed writing about in this book?
Uh, yes, Becca. Becca was my favorite. She is very grumpy. She's definitely a throw punches first, ask questions later, kind of unlikable woman. And I gave her a lot of my anger and my frustration. I mean, I don't kind of act out in the way that she does. But it was very cathartic to write a character that just really was open about, this is how she handles her traumas. She's the protector and the one who puts herself between whatever threat she perceives and the people that she cares about, and she's not ashamed of that making her, whether people think she's grumpy or she's unlikable or she's overreacting or whatever. And it's for me, it was very freeing to be able to write a female character that was unapologetically not nice sometimes.
I think this is the second book where you told us when you sent it in that you weren't sure if the main character was likable.
Yeah. But for different reasons this time. Yeah. Eloise last time was got more of my anxiety and my uncertainty, and that kind of come with her, I think, came across as like being kind of controlling and a little bit uptight. Whereas Becca is more just openly aggressive at times. But yeah, I have written some. I think my first book, the female main character for that one was a little bit more sweet and a little bit more laid back. And the sequel for this one, when we get to Peyton, she's a little bit more of the same. She's a little bit of a sweeter character. But I have definitely enjoyed writing the unlikable women.
I think you're good at it. I think you're better at it than you think.
Well, I did. To be fair, my betas did come back and say, you know what, we really just don't like her. You should probably soften her up a little bit. And I did do a little bit of tweaking on her and I don't think I really dialed back some of the areas where she was a little bit aggressive, but I did add some stuff to kind of soften her and make her a little bit more human, a little bit more reasonable.
But you're not afraid to go there. But I like that.
Yeah, I definitely get nervous about it, because I think that I think when you get into book circles and you start talking to romance people, whether readers or writers, there is kind of a known thing that the male characters get away with a lot more.
Yeah.
When it comes to unlikable actions than the female characters do. So to sit down and write a character and be like, yeah, there's definitely going to be people that are not going to like her. It feels risky, but I think women deserve to be messy, and I think they deserve to be traumatized in ways that aren't pretty. And I like to write those characters that are just unapologetically themselves, even if other people don't necessarily like them.
I think it gives more realism to the story because, not all women out there are going to be the sweet ones.
Yeah.
And there's going to be women out there like these characters. And I think that gives a voice that might not be out there very much, that it's okay.
And I hope it does. I hope that the women that have had their bumps in life and their traumas and stuff and have come out of it not being perfectly pretty or perfectly nice all of the time, that they are able to see themselves in those characters and say, you know what, I still deserve to be loved, even if I am, a little bit gruff, a little bit broken.
And I think you do a very good job of showing the reason why they are the way they are. So they're not just unlikable just to be unlikable. There's reasons behind it, and those reasons are very clear in your writing. And I think that that's very important for people to see that this, like you said, this is how she's dealing with her trauma. And not everyone deals with trauma and most people don't actually in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think that's a big theme for this particular story. Everybody in here kind of has their own traumas, and they all handle them in very different ways. And that's really one of the big misunderstandings between the two main characters is she handled her trauma by becoming protective and being aggressive and kind of in your face about handling the problems, and he ran away. And she's like, how could you do that and leave behind somebody that you cared about? Whereas he's thinking like self-preservation.
Right.
So, they really handle those in very different ways, and they kind of have to come to the understanding that whatever way you survive those types of situations, that's what you have to do. That there's not really a one right way to survive when you're struggling the way that they were struggling.
Exactly. So book 2, you were almost done writing.
I'm almost done writing, finally.
So that will be coming out next year.
Yes, that one is going to be called Against the Tide, and that one is going to be Henry and Peyton's love story, and we are introduced to those characters in the first book. That is Becca's sister and Grayson's childhood best friend. So that one is a little bit different from this one because this one is like an instant dislike, whereas that one is an instant, like, Henry sees her and he's done. Like, he's immediately knows that's the woman for him, and most of the rest of it is him trying to convince her that that he's the right man for her because she's been through a lot. She's been through a lot of trauma, and she's, you know, he's been waiting patiently for her to deal with her stuff and be ready. So that one I think has a little bit different, a little bit sweeter vibe than this one does. But
okay, I can't wait to see what that cover is going to look like.
yeah, I love the covers. I'm always super excited to see the covers. She does such a good job.
Well, that's why we have Diana. She does amazing. So Diana from Triumph Covers does our cover. So again, this is the cover. This is the fabulous book that debuts today. So go out and get it. If you want the paperback, please check back on Amazon in the morning. It might be up later tonight, but definitely it will be there in the morning. So we are very excited. Well, thank you, Ashley, for joining us. We're so excited to have this book out. Congratulations on your third book. There's your third launch day. So this is fabulous. So stay tuned next month in June. We will have Mike Steele and his book, Not Lucille, which is going another direction because that's a middle grade, late elementary school age book. So we're really excited to present that to you in June. But right now, go buy Beneath Calm Waters, go buy Deliver Me, go buy Ashley's other books, go buy Death Sentence. They are all fabulous books. Get them all and enjoy Ashley's books. I know some people have left a review that arked it and said that Beneath Calm Waters was their first of your books and they loved it. So I'm hoping they're going to go back and buy the other ones.
Right, that's a nice thing about having a backlist, right? Find one and maybe they go back and find the others.
It's great.
Thank you very much for having me and for doing the interview with me. I appreciate it.
Of course, we're very excited for this book, and thank you everyone for joining us. And please like and share our YouTube channel, and we will see you in June. Thank you.